Alright, hello everybody, look. We're at the ocean. I wanted to get close up. The sun's right about to come out again. It's right there. Right? And so we're going to read Evelyn Underhill's Mysticism. It might be windy right now. I'm going to put on the mic in a second, but I wanted you guys to get it up close. Like, literally the water is right here. Here it comes. There's my feet. I don't want to do that right now. Okay, and so I was reading it last night for us, and I just wanted to continue because it's so good, right? Once I get away from the ocean, it will be less windy. And so I wanted to continue, so I came back. This is the next day from last time. And it's studying the nature and development of spiritual consciousness. And so it's how we develop our understanding of our mystic consciousness. Let me head over. Okay, so Evelyn, this book is from 1910. How this came about was that I was going to read it by myself, and then I just felt inspired to share it because, I don't know, I'm like that. I'm one of 4 kids, and just, you know, when you get something good, you want to give it to the other people around you. And so you can start here. Just trust that this video came to you for a reason. My name is Dr. Cheryl Meyer. I am a psychologist in my day job for the last 20 plus years. So I give us some psychological tips. And I've been studying mysticism and practicing meditation and contemplation for so many years too. And so I'll give us tips as it comes up. But look at the sun rays, right? But I like also just reading the book and trusting what's going to happen. And so you can go to my playlist and start at the beginning, but I encourage you to start here and then do that. Because, I don't know, I just think that this video came to you for a reason. I trust that. Alright, and so I'll go right here. I see a rock. I want a rock. I got one. Welcome. I'm so, like, today was just the most amazing day, but you know, you don't want to just depend on circumstances, but it wasn't. It was the best day because my inner self was so at peace. Okay. Oh, I'm just going to let you guys see that while I get the book out and just get in the present moment, you know. There's sun rays right there coming down from those clouds. I got a jacket, I got everything in case I need it. Okay, so let's, if you have any questions for me, feel free to put them in the comments. It takes the video out to more people if you like this, and subscribe to my channel. A lot of people are watching without subscribing yet, so I encourage you, because right now, anyway, just subscribe. You'll be thankful for it later. Alright, let me put this down. There. Okay. I got my stand. I wanted you guys to get up close to the ocean today. I know some of you do not live anywhere close to an ocean, and so that's just my gift too. I wanted to give that to you. Alright. Here we go. One more step. I know last night we just parked like a street away from the ocean. So today I was like, all right, I'll go early and walk. Here we go. Now. But we want to get there, the sun coming. Okay. Now the volume may change one time while I put the mic on, but then it ought to be good. So C.S. Lewis was influenced by Evelyn Underhill and Charles Williams, these people that were in the Inklings. Charles Williams put a lot of her books together. Oh, that's so sweet that that guy is right there just watching the sunset. I'm really happy for him. They actually have a jacket with a lapel, so the mic got it. Alright, so that's about it for background under information. The book is from 1910, so I knew I could read it for us for free. I had to invite him. Just come listen to the book while you watch the sunset, right? Oh my gosh. I'm just so excited for the sun to come out too. Okay. Let's see where we were. Okay, we're talking about introversion, recollection, and quiet. And the last video, I did the introduction where, I'll just show it to you for 1 second so you see. She just talks about what she's going to talk about, so you have a little bit of a gist. Wow, we got pretty far. It's chapter 6. This, but I don't want to block the... There you go, if you want to take a screenshot. Okay. All right, I'm going to just sit back. Wow. Okay, human industry, says Hilton here, must be joined to grace. If the spiritual eye is to be opened, work must be done. So long as the eye which looks upon time fills itself with things and usurps the conscious field, that spiritual eye which looks upon eternity can hardly act at all. And this eye must not only be opened, it must be trained so that it may endure to gaze steadfastly at the uncreated light. Oh my gosh, did I pick? I didn't do this. I'll just say, did divine love work in me from all that meditating to make me aware to come to this sunset? All right, I'll just let it happen. You know I can't organize this. To gaze steadfastly at the uncreated light. This training and purging of the transcendental sight is described under many images, diverse in show of words, one in meaning and verity. Its essence is a progressive cleansing of the mirror, a progressive self-emptying of all that is not real, the attainment of that unified state of consciousness, which will permit a pure, imageless apprehension of the final reality, which, quote, hath no image, to be received by the self. Naked horizon, emptiness, nothingness. Entire surrender, peaceful love, in life knotted, N-A-U-G-H-T-E-D. Say the mystics again and again, right? Entire surrender. Where apprehension of the divine comes by way of vision or audition, this is but a concession to human weakness, a sign, they think, that the senses are not quite killed. It is a translation of the true tongue of angels into a dialect that they can understand, a steady abolition of sense imagery, a cutting off of all possible sources of illusion, all possible encouragements of selfhood and pride, the most fertile of all sources. Oh, wow. I didn't get to wave at the surfers, but it was so awesome watching them surf on the way out here. What? I'm still here. It's just like you don't need anything else in life right now. I need nothing. It's like St. John of the Cross. He says, she quotes him a lot. It says don't want anything. Like choose, not to want anything. And that's what you can do. But when you're in such a state where you're just being present with what is, then you're in a state of not wanting anything because you don't want anything, because you know you are everything and you have everything and you're one with everything. Anyway, I only had some iced tea today, so it's not any other kind of high. A little bit of iced tea. A little bit of sunshine in your life. All right. Okay, all possible encouragements of selfhood and pride, the most fertile of all sources of deception. Okay, selfhood and pride can. Oh, wow. All right, I'll try to. There. I don't know if that's better. The sun just came out. I don't know where I'm supposed to tap on the screen. See how? Do we want to see it that way, or? Yeah, maybe I'll tap over here. Oh my gosh. Okay. I know I take my kids and they're like, Mom, we've seen a sunset before. I'm like, no, but you've never seen this one. Okay. So let's go back. A steady abolition of sense imagery, a cutting off of all possible sources of illusion, all possible encouragements of selfhood and pride, the most fertile of all sources of deception. This is the condition of pure sight, and the degrees of orison, the, quote, steep stairs of love, which they climb so painfully, are based upon this necessity. Now the terms used by individual mystics, the divisions which they adopt in describing the self's progress in this art of orison, are bewildering in their variety. Here, more than elsewhere, has the mania for classification obsessed them. We find, too, when we come to compare them one with another, that the language which they employ is not always so exact as it seems. That they do not all use traditional terms in the same sense. Sometimes by the word contemplation, they intend to describe the whole process of introversion. Sometimes they reserve it for the horizon of union. Sometimes identify it with ecstasy. It has been pointed out by Delacroix and even St. Teresa's classifications of her own states is far from lucid and varies in each of her principal works. Thus, in the life, the life of St. Teresa of Avila, whilst in the way of perfection, she appears to treat recollection and quiet as synonyms. So recollection and quiet are the same. Whilst in the way of perfection, these conditions are sharply differentiated. In the interior castle, she adopts an entirely different system. The orison of quiet being there called tasting of God. Taste and see that I am God. Taste and know that I am God. St. John of the Cross in Ascent of Mount Carmel talks about this really beautifully. Finally, Augustine Baker, in treating of the prayer of interior silence and quiet, insists that by the term quiet, St. Teresa did not mean this at all, but a form of supernatural contemplation. Thus, we are gradually forced to the conclusion that the so-called degrees of orison, so neatly tabulated by ascetic writers, are largely artificial and symbolic, that the process which they profess to describe is really like life itself, one and continuous, not a stairway but a slope, and the parts into which they break it up are diagrammatic. Nearly every mystic makes these breaks in a different place, though continuing to use the language of his predecessors. In his efforts towards self-analysis, he divides and subdivides, combines and differentiates his individual moods. Hence, the confusion of mind which falls upon those who try to harmonize different systems of contemplation, to identify St. Teresa's 4 degrees with Hugh of St. Victor's other 4, and with Richard of St. Victor's 4 steps of ardent love, or to accommodate upon this diagram Hilton's simple and poetic 3 steps of contemplation: knowing, loving, and knowing and loving. Oh, that's so great. I like the 3-step one. Knowing, loving, and knowing and loving, where the dreamer rather than the map maker speaks. Such fine shades, says Augustine Baker, in this connection are nicely distinguished by the author, rather out of a particular experience of the effects passing in his own soul, which perhaps are not the same in all, than for any more general reason. My spiritual director was talking to me. She said that, let's see if we can do this up, that St. John of the Cross, his is, okay, one is apophatic and one is not apophatic, or I forgot the without, it's German, not German, Greek is A is without. So one is without your senses and the other is with your senses. So St. Teresa of Avila used her 5 senses, but St. John of the Cross did not, and he recommended not doing that. And so, whoa, that's so funny. All right. I don't know how the screen works sometimes, so just, whoa, pretty. If you're just on the podcast of this, then, you really ought to go over to the video and watch this one, I think. But you can just keep listening. And use all the times where I'm describing what's going on just to be silent is my recommendation, but do what you will, what you'd like. Okay, so some diagram, however, some set scheme the writer on introversion must have if he is to describe with lucidity the development of the contemplative consciousness. And so long as the methodological nature of this diagram is kept in mind, there can be little objection to the use of it. I propose then to examine under 3 divisions that continuous and orderly stream of experience, that process of incessant change by which the mystical consciousness is turned from visible to invisible things. We will give to these 3 divisions names which will be familiar to all readers of ascetic literature: recollection, quiet, and contemplation. All right. Each of these 3 parts of the introversive experience may be discerned in embryo in that little experiment at which the reader has been invited to assist. Oh, we did an experiment last time where you look at something in nature and put your consciousness in your eyes and focus on just that one thing. So if you can see something in here besides, I don't know if you want to see a cloud or the ocean or whatever, you can do that again in this video. I won't explain the whole thing, but it's just be really present, like John Butler says, feet on the ground. Take a deep breath. Feel yourself in your body. And just do that for a couple minutes. And then she talks about how, I'll tell you afterwards, hopefully I'll remember to tell you what she says after that, because I don't want to give it away. The active concentration, the silence, the new perception which results. Okay, well, she just said it. Okay, so so the experiment at which the reader has been invited to assist, the act of concentration, the silence, the new perception which results. Each has a characteristic beginning which links it with its predecessor, and a characteristic end which shades off into the next state. Thus, recollection begins in meditation and develops into a horizon of inward silence, which again melts into the true quiet. quiet, as it becomes deeper, passes into infused contemplation. And this grows through contemplation proper to the horizon of passive union, which is the highest of the non-ecstatic introversive states. And so that's what she says. Hopefully it's been 2 minutes. Is when you just look and stop naming it and you're present, then it's like you become one with that thing, and then you know its properties, but not like know like a scientist. You know because you were just that bird, you were just that flower, you know. There's these pretty flowers next to me again. But it's not from naming it. When you name it, when you name something, you put it in a box. And so look at it without naming it. Like look at the sun without naming it. You know what I mean? It's so cool to just not even call it a star or anything. You're just gazing at it and being present with what is. Okay, so introversive states. Merely to state the fact thus is to remind ourselves how smoothly continuous is this life process of the soul. It is the object of horizon, as it is the object of all education, to discipline and develop certain growing faculties. In this case, the faculties are those of transcendental self, of the transcendental self, the new man. All those powers which we associate with the, quote, spiritual consciousness, the, quote, sons of God, however like the sons of men, begin as babies, and their first lessons must not be too hard. Therefore, the educative process conforms to and takes advantage of every step of the natural process of growth, as we, in the education of our children, make the natural order in which their faculties develop, the basis of our schemes or cultivation. Recollection, quiet, and contemplation then answer to the order in which the mystic's powers unfold. Remember the three: recollection, quiet, and contemplation. Then answer to the order in which the mystic's powers unfold. Roughly speaking, we shall find that the form of spiritual attention, which is called meditative or recollective, goes side by side with the purification of the self. We read a long chapter on the purgation of the self, purification of the self. God does that. Divine love does that. It's kind of like if God is the sun, right? God is way more than the sun, but if God is like the sun, then when you have a glimpse of the sun and you love it, you love divine love, and as you get pulled more and more towards your home from which you came, like JRR Tolkien talks about in The Hobbit, he wanted to call it there and back again, a hobbit's journey. And so we come here and we go back again. So this is just an analogy, right? But if it's like the sun, then as you wish and it's like letting go of wanting, but still doing this discipline and being present for God, It's like if you wanted to be the best nurse in the world, you couldn't keep going, okay, I'm going to be the best nurse in the world. You just keep showing up to nursing school and then showing up to be a good nurse and then be excellent at everything you do. And you can have that goal, but you also have to let go of it, right? And so what this purgation of the soul is as you travel towards the sun, it burns away anything else. And if you're not willing to let go of it, then you give up this journey and you stop. But if you're willing to let go of it, then you keep saying to God, all right, keep burning it. And it's really, really painful, I'll tell you, a lot of times. But it's just like if you knew your child that you love is on the sun and you wanted to see your child. It's just like that. You do it all for love because it's for love's sake. If you did it, even if your child wasn't on the sun, to save your child, We did it all for love. All right. That's a Chicago song. Okay. That's how the purgation just happens, right? It happens, but you're willing for it to happen, but it's still painful and you'd like to run from it and you could stop being courageous. It's just like every point in The Lord of the Rings. I'm listening and reading The Return of the King again. And it's like every point, Pippin or Merry or Aragorn or Gandalf, they could all turn back. Frodo, Sam, they could turn back, but they don't. They keep going, even if they're going to face death. Wow, it's pink now. I don't know if you guys can see that. It's pink up here. A little bit pink. All right. Okay, it's called the meditative or recollective, goes side by side with the purification of the self. That quiet tends to be characteristic of illumination. That contemplation, at any rate, in its higher forms, is most constantly experienced by those who have attained or nearly attained the unitive way. At the same time, just as the self, in its first mystic life, before it has passed through the dark night of the will, when you just keep learning how to surrender. Jesus calls it the narrow path, and few find it, because it's like there is a gate in Jerusalem they call the Eye of the Needle gate, and he said it's harder for a camel to go through an eye of a needle than a rich man to enter into heaven. And it's like a camel had to take all of its packs off to go through that gate. It's very narrow, and then you could put all the packs back on. And so a rich man, someone who is trusting in their riches, someone in their riches of their personality or their Lamborghinis or their money in the bank or their girlfriends or boyfriends or whatever, whoever, or their fame or whatever they're trusting in, if they were asked to go this road to get to divine love and let go of all of that, would they be willing to let go of that? Well, they've learned how to hold really tightly, and so that's why it's so hard for a rich man. But then the disciples said, well, then who can enter, Because all of us are rich in our own egotism. We're all caught up in our personality self and our programming from childhood and all this stuff, right? And he said, with man, that's impossible. With God, all things are possible. And so you have to tap into grace. You have to tap into the divine nature to be able to do these things. It's not about doing, but it's like letting God transform by the renewing of your mind. It's metanoia, metamorphosis of your nous, N-O-U-S. It's an amazing process, right? I highly recommend it. I just ask, look, this is like an arc here. I ask, let's see if I can tip it. Look at that. Wow. I ask that this grace continue in me. I'm not saying I'm perfect or anything. I'm just saying if I can go on this path somehow, if I've been led to it, then you can be. So don't like, I'm so just as insecure as you. Like, there's nothing more special about me. At the same time, just as the self in its first mystic life, before it has passed through the dark night of the will, often seems to run through the whole gamut of spiritual states and attain that oneness with the absolute which it seeks, though as a fact it has not yet reached those higher levels of consciousness on which true and permanent union takes place. So too in its orison. At any point in its career, it may experience for brief periods that imageless and overpowering sense of identity with the absolute life, that loving and exalted absorption in God, which is called passive union, and anticipates the consciousness which is characteristic of the deified life. Over and over again, in its prayerful process, it recapitulates in little the whole great process of its life. It runs up for an instant to the levels where it is not yet strong enough to dwell. So you run up, like I ran up on this mountain in Turkey, and it had all these statues, all these heads of statues that had fallen over, but it was so cool. And you get this feeling like you're closer to heaven or something, because you went up in altitude, and you, I don't know, it's in Turkey, Mount Ararat is in Turkey, where the Ark of Noah landed somewhere, and Ephesus is there where Mary lived after the resurrection in Turkey. It's Turkey now. It used to be Greece in that part. And so you run up for a glimpse and you feel it, and you want that feeling state to last forever, and then you come back down because you're not yet in that unitive place. You're not in the deified life completely yet. Theosis, Saint Athanasius says, God became man so that man could become God. You're not Godified fully yet. You just have that experience, right? It runs up for an instant to levels where it is not yet strong enough to dwell. I just want to be aware still of my surroundings. Okay, good. Therefore, we must not be too strict in our identification of the grades of education with the stages of growth. You know, you're not like in first grade or third grade. Maybe you skip to 12th grade and then go back and take 8th grade over again, or you go into graduate school and then go back to college. You know, it's not exactly this education. What you usually do, I heard it's like this. Okay, so watch this line. Like this. I don't know if you can see it. It's a line that goes up like this, but there's dips. There's little dips and then big dips. I ought to do it towards the camera, I think. Let's see. Yeah. Anyway, maybe I'll go out on the ground if it's light afterwards. Okay. With stages of growth. This education, rightly understood, is one coherent process. It consists in a steady and voluntary surrender of the awakened consciousness, its feeling, thought, and will to the play of those transcendental influences, that inflowing vitality, which it conceives of as divine. In the preparative process of recollection, the unruly mind is brought into harmony. In quiet, the eager will is silenced. The wheel of imagination is stilled. In contemplation, the heart at last comes to its own. Cor ad cor locatur. She said that earlier and translated it, so that was in the last video. Let me just see if I can. It might be windy while I look for a second. She didn't translate it a second time. I know it was on the right side of the page. Oh, here. She said, life has spoken to life. Cor ad cor lacitur. Oh, lacitur. Maybe that's Latin? Locution is locutor, so it's life, cor. Because anyway. Life speaks to life, right? I'm so glad I looked that up. I'm so glad I remembered it was there. I'm not saying for me, I'm saying for you. In their simplest, crudest forms, these three acts are the deliberate concentration upon the meek, resting in the joyous, the meek resting in. So you're being meek, resting in this place. The joyous communing with, and the ineffable object of man's quest. The joyous communing with the ineffable object of man's quest. Okay, so I'm going to say that again, but with the three. In their simplest, crudest forms, these three acts, which are recollection, quiet, and contemplation, are the deliberate concentration upon the meek resting in, the joyous communing with, the ineffable object of man's quest. They involve a progressive concentration of the mystic's powers, a gradual handing over of the reins from the surface intelligence to the deeper mind, a progressive reception of the inflowing Spirit of God. In recollection, the surface mind still holds, so to speak, the leading strings, but in quiet, it surrenders them wholly, allowing consciousness to sink into that, quote, blissful silence in which God works and speaks. This act of surrender, this deliberate negation of thought, is an essential preliminary of the contemplative state. Oh, look, it's pink. It's so pink under there. Let me see if I can't zoom in. Let me see if I turn up the brightness. You'll see the pink. That's the sun right there, peeking out before it goes all the way down. So, lovers put out the candles and draw the curtains when they wish to see the god and the goddess. Aw, that's so sweet. And in the higher communion, the night of thought is the light of perception. all sorts of mystics talk about God like a marriage union, you know. It's like you're putting out the candles and just letting everything be soft, and you're just present. All right, so the education of the self in the different degrees. Sorry, I'm not going to say what just happened. It was sweet though. The education of the self in different degrees of horizon has been compared by Saint Teresa in a celebrated passage in her life to 4 ways of watering the garden of the soul, so that it may bring forth its flowers and fruits. The first and most primitive of these ways is meditation. This, she says, is like drawing water by hand from a deep well. Wow. The slowest and most laborious of all means of irrigation. You know, it reminds me of Rachel when she said, let me water your camels too. And it's like, I think they have 20 gallons of water each, so she just kept getting the water out of that well. Next to this is the horizon of quiet, which is a little better and easier. For here, soul seems to receive some help, i.e. with the stilling of the senses, the subliminal faculties are brought into play. The well has now been fitted with a windlass. I don't know what a windlass is. That little Moorish water wheel, possessed by every Castilian farm. Okay, so then, something goes to get the water for you. It's connected to that. It was still made. It's kind of like you've learned to make that. And so you're not drawing it out by hand. And so it comes faster, but hence we get more water for the energy we expend. More sense of reality, in the supernatural reality, transcendental, in exchange for our abstraction from the unreal. Although the water is higher, and accordingly the labor is much less than it was when the water had to be drawn out of the depths of the well, I mean that the water is nearer to it, for grace now reveals itself more distinctly to the soul. It's kind of like, now I don't want this to be like a crude example, like too basic, like that crude, but it's like, if you're hiring someone and you have a company and someone has had 10 years of experience in that thing, and they have really good work to show for it, then it's kind of like that. It's kind of like grace meets you, not because you've proven yourself in like, I'm trying to manipulate God to give me more grace, but you've shown, no, I've been committed to this road for 10 years and I choose to be committed as long as I live. God help me, And so it's like the universe, they call it the universe, but it's God, divine grace, divine love, meets you and helps you because, at the beginning when we first come to Jesus, come to Christ, or baptize or whatever, it's like King David says, restore to me the joy of my salvation. Sometimes there's a burst. You get a picture of what this relationship will be. It's kind of like the beginning of a relationship. You see what this relationship can be, and then you enter into the power struggle after the romantic phase. And, and if you get through that, then the next stage of the relationship looks a lot like the romantic stage, but it's so much deeper. And it's just beautiful, but hardly anyone gets to that stage. I'm not laughing at that. I just know this as a psychologist for the past 20 plus years. I wish it for everybody. I wish this with you, with God, Eckhart Tolle, I was reading The Power of Now, and he was saying, if you get the inside sorted out, all the outside will fall into place, So that's why I keep focusing on the inside, Maybe to the detriment. I might ought to focus on the outside a little bit more, like make sure to get laundry done and stuff like that, and not. Anyway, it gets done, but okay, and so the labor is much less than it was when the water had to be drawn out of the depths of the well. I mean that the water is nearer to it, for grace now reveals itself more distinctly to the soul. In the third stage, we leave all voluntary activities of the mind. The gardener no longer depends on his own exertions. Contact between subject and object is established. There is no more stress and strain. It is as if a little river now ran through our garden and watered it. We have but to direct the stream. Okay, and I want you to know, I haven't read this on my channel yet, but I read 2 other books by George MacDonald But that reminded me so much. George MacDonald, there's a book called Sir Gibby that's free online, and there's an Audible of it already. And also, oh, look at that. And also, there's a LibriVox of it, but also you can get the book free online, or buy the book. If you want to buy the book, not everything has to be free, right? I'm used to just YouTube. It's like, this is free, but you can buy the book or the Audible. But there's a app called, in America, I don't know if it's ever other places, but it's called Voice Dream Reader, just the reader part, and it will read PDFs. You can choose Brian, and I'm not selling anything, I'm just telling you. My uncle told me about this so many years ago, so I made a video on it. But Brian is a British voice, and so he'll read it to you. But anyway, it doesn't matter. In that book, in Sir Gibby by George MacDonald, C.S. Lewis said every book he ever wrote quoted, either directly or indirectly, George MacDonald, right? And so in the book Sir Gibby, Gibby is this, he's like this child that's mute, so he can't speak. But sometimes he sings and hums, like, it's really beautiful. But he meets these people, Jan and her husband, up on this mountain, and they live in this little hut, and they're poor. It's so awesome, because George MacDonald was very poor in a lot of his life. He had so many kids, and so some of his characters are poor, and he describes why God's letting them be poor in this life. But I won't give any more spoilers, but Sir Gibby goes up there, up to the mountain. He's running away because he was almost killed. And but there's a river in their garden, just like this, just like what was just described by Evelyn Underhill. I wonder if she read it, because George MacDonald was around the 1800s. She had to have known his work. I wonder if she was alive around the same time before he died. I think he wrote in 1858. That's incredible to think of. Anyway, it's because he's always talking about, hold on. George MacDonald is always writing about levels of consciousness, always. They look like fairy story books, but they're talking about levels of consciousness all the way throughout. And so on my YouTube channel, I read The Princess and the Goblin and The Princess and the Curdie, and it's all talking about levels of spiritual consciousness. Those books will help you. I don't want to be like, here, do this, and they'll help you accelerate. Don't look for that, but they really will help you understand this path, and so much, just like The Lord of the Rings does for me, and The Hobbit. That's why I put them on there. Everyone's like, why are you putting these books on, They don't have to understand why. I'm doing it so we all have all the resources, the best resources for our navigating our spiritual awakening. That's why I do it. You guys can know. Anyway, I appreciate your presence here. If you didn't subscribe or like or comment, make sure to do so. And that helps push this video out to lots of other people, because whatever. That's just how the algorithms work, right? Because I'm not paying for ads or anything like that, or paying for subs or anything like that. So I started a little, if you want to call late on YouTube, but it doesn't have to be too late for us. God knows. Okay, so a stream. It's as if a river ran through our garden and watered it. We have but to direct the stream. In the fourth and highest stage, God himself waters our garden with rain from heaven, quote, drop by drop. That's so beautiful, right? This attitude of the self is now that of perfect receptivity, passive contemplation, loving trust. Individual activity is sunk in the, quote, great life of the all. Now the measure of the mystic's real progress is and must always be the measure of his love. For his apprehension is an apprehension of the heart. His education, his watering of the garden of the soul, is a cultivation of this one flower, this Rosa Mystica. Oh, no wonder God always gave me a rose. I kept seeing it in my mind as rise, open your soul eyes, R-O-S-E. But it's teaching us that. It's this Rosa Mystica, and I kept being drawn to Mother Mary with the rose, underneath on fire, or her heart on fire with the rose. She's standing on roses after she steps on that serpent man. Which has its root in God. The degree of his horizon then will be accompanied, his or her, she uses her often for the soul and his for this process. The degrees of his horizon then will be accompanied step by step by those other degrees of exalted feeling states, which Richard of St. Victor called the degrees of ardent love, right? Without their presence, all the drill in the world will not bring him to the true contemplative state. Though it may easily produce abnormal powers of perception of the kind familiar to students of the occult. So students of the occult develop these perceptions, and they do all these horrible initiations. Yes, they might make them see things more, but to what end? If you're not loving God, you're not following the first commandment, which God is always giving us the safest way for union with God. And the safest way to have true power and true mystic power, because you're not looking for mystic power, is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. That's all this is. That's all this is. And that helps you to love your neighbor as yourself, doesn't it? Right? It would do. It would do. It just does do that. It's a natural. And if you start, once you start surrendering to divine love, why wouldn't you hear more? And because you're developing those perceptions, a lot of mine came out of pain. I was talking to someone the other day, two different people, and they say, I don't know how any kind of spiritual depth can happen without pain. Now, the people in the occult, I won't even talk about, because you're not meant to talk about. It says don't talk about what people do in evil, but they will create pain because they don't know that you can find this path with love, But anyway, I wish them freedom from that. I still think Christ can redeem them, but if you want to understand it as that, I welcome all religions, so I don't mean to put you off, on your own spiritual path if you follow a different understanding. I think obviously we know Christ had union with God because they call him the God-man. He was God on this earth, and so he showed us this path, and he created a way for us to get there. But that's a mystery I won't go into right here, because I don't want to get into theological debates. And it's a mystery, so I don't. God knows. I do not. I love that quote from John Butler. God knows. I do not know. Our theory of mystic education then turns out to be very like our theory of mystic life. In both, there is a progressive surrender of selfhood under the steady advance of conquering love. Like conquering love. Love is conquering us, like the hound of heaven. All but thou didst take from my hand. Thou didst take only that I might seek it in your hand, fondest, blindest, weakest. I am he whom thou seekest. God is saying, to Francis Thompson, who's writing for all of us, like, I am the one that you seek. It's like St. Augustine saying, our hearts are restless until we find, I'm blocking the wind with my hand, we find our repose in God, fondest, blindest, weakest. I am he whom thou seekest. That's the end of The Hound of Heaven. I read the whole poem. You can listen to it on my YouTube channel. Just look up The Hound of Heaven and Dr. Cheryl Meyer. But there's videos of other people like doing it in video form and stuff like that. I just wanted to, it's another resource it's just, I don't know how people can walk the spiritual path without that poem. And so I put it out there. I was inspired one day to just record it. Look at the sky. Look at the sky. See how it shines for you. That's Coldplay. Yellow. Okay, so our theory of mystic education then turns out to be very like our theory of mystic life. In both, there is a progressive surrender of the selfhood under the steady advance of conquering love, a stilling of the I, the me, the mine,
which is linked by all the senses and by all its own desires to the busy world of visible things. Someone taught me, I have this on my phone. Actually, it comes up every night, but I sometimes just don't see it anymore because it comes up. But it says, I, me, mind. Every time that comes up, I think that's what comes up now on my calendar for the last 3 months. Every time you say I, me, or mind, say the mind, the mind. The mind, it's like the body wants to have food right now. The mind, the mind thinks it has to, date that surfer over there. And there's no surfers, I'm just saying. You know what I mean? The mind, that's the mind. The mind thinks I have to stop this now, or whatever it thinks, Just, you can practice that. Okay, so she said this will, okay. Under the steady advance of conquering love, a stilling of the, quote, I, the me, the mine, end quote, which is linked by all the senses and by all its own desires to the busy world of visible things. This progressive surrender. I'm going to turn my back so that I don't have to keep putting my hands here, so that I block the wind with my body. That makes a lot more sense. Hopefully I do. I can't test this sound right now. I think I'll cup it anyway. It's connected to the busy world of visible things. This progressive surrender appears in the practice of Horizon as a progressive inward retreat from circumference to center, from the outside to center, Here. Oh, I wear this ring to remind me to do that, right? Because Jesus says when you pray, go into your inner room and shut the door. Right? And if you're just listening to this, it's a ring, it looks kind of like the Greek eye, but I don't think of it like that. There's 3 bands on the side, like the Trinity, and there's 2 rings, and then a diamond in the middle. It's not a real diamond, so if you have offense with diamonds. And then I have this infinity too. But I wear things to remind me, just like this bracelet. Lo, I am with you always. I'm always looking down and remembering. No, be present. The I am is with me, always with you. Go into the center of the center. And yeah, Jesus says when you pray, go into the middle, go into your inner room and shut the door. That's what this is talking about. He's always talking about how to raise your level of consciousness. If you can just be present with his words. I heard this Christian mystic, right? And people were surprised because people, like Buddhist people of all different religions would go to him, and he would say the New Testament ought to be a mystic's best friend. If you read the words of Christ over and over again in the surrendered state, you see he's talking about higher levels. He's always. That guy had amazing interpretations. But anyway, he's not a cult, so I'm not suggesting that at all. You guys know that. I hope you know that. That's why I'm reading Evelyn Underhill. She was an Anglican, like C.S. Lewis is Anglican, which is it's called the Via Media, the way of the middle, between Catholicism and Orthodox and other Protestant or whatever. But anyway, it doesn't matter what she is. She's giving us this amazing information. So I encourage you not to label me or anybody. The progressive surrender appears in the practice of Horizon as a progressive inward retreat from circumference to center, to that ground of the soul, that substantial somewhat, is italicized, in man, deep, buried for most of us beneath the great rubbish heap of our surface interests, where human life and divine life meet. To clear away the rubbish heap so that he may get down to this treasure house is from one point of view the initial task of the contemplative. This clearing away is the first part of introversion, that journey inwards to his own center, where, stripped of all his cleverness and merit, reduced to his nothingness, he can, quote, meet God without intermediary. This ground of the soul, this strange inward sanctuary to which the normal man so seldom penetrates, is, says Meister Eckhart. She says Eckhart, but she's talking about Meister Eckhart. Eckhart totally wasn't born yet, but he got his name from Meister Eckhart. That's where he took it from. Okay, says Eckhart, Meister Eckhart, the German mystic that was in Cologne, Germany, he says, immediately receptive of the divine being, and no one can move it but God alone, right? Okay, so I'll go back. This ground of the soul, this strange inward sanctuary to which the normal man so seldom penetrates, is, says Eckhart, immediately receptive of the divine being, and, quote, no one can move it but God alone. There, the finite self encounters the infinite, and by a close and loving communion with and feeding on the attributes of the divine substance, is remade in the interest of the absolute life. This encounter, the consummation of mystical culture, is what we mean by contemplation in its highest form. Here we are on the verge of that great self-merging act, which is of the essence of pure love, which reality has sought of us, and reality with a capital R. And we have unknowingly desired of it with a capital I. Here, contemplation and union are one. Thus do we grow, says Roysbrook, and carried above ourselves, above reason, into the very heart of love. There do we feed according to the Spirit and take flight for the Godhead by naked love. We go to the encounter of the bridegroom, to the encounter of his Spirit, which is his love. And this immense love burns and consumes us in the Spirit and draws us into that union where bliss awaits us. It's so awesome. Okay, let's see. There's a section now in this chapter, called recollection. And so I think I'll end here. We have 3 minutes left, but I'll show you where we are. Recollection, and that way I'll know where to start as well. I'm not doing it for that, but it is super cold, and so I brought my Bob Marley beanie, because Bob Marley's a mystic, you know. He said all of his songs are teaching about mystic understanding of God, you know. He says, open your eyes and look within, your spiritual eyes. Ask God to open your spiritual eyes. Are you satisfied with the life you're living? You know, being caught in these outward things, the outer circumference, you know, the trash heap. Go in. There's this gold inside. Rumi talks about that so much. And Eckhart totally talks about that. He says in the beginning of The Power of Now, he says it's like, you know, there's a beggar sitting on the side of the road asking for money, and I'm going to get my hat. And see, look, Bob Marley and the Wailers. And he's sitting on a box, right? And the mystic person says, have you ever looked inside of the box? He's like, no, this is just an old box. And he looks inside and there's all this gold, and he never knew. That's what this is like. There's so many examples of what this is like. Let me get my other jacket. Okay, so you guys don't have to be with me for this part, but I wish you love. I'm so glad that I didn't decide to just read this book by myself, and that you get to read it with me and listen. And I welcome you to any one of these videos or podcasts. I'm not just filling time, I'm just saying we get this little opportunity. Oh, let me show you, okay? See, you stayed for the end part, so you get bonus material, right? I wonder where I put my AirPods. That's for the Lord of the Rings on my walk back, right? Not that I have to listen to something. Okay, so look, I'll show you the flower before it gets super dark. Oh, it's closing. Seemed like it was a little more open before. Here's one of them. And there's some pink ones over there. They're sort of dried up. Here's a pink one. And then here's this has helped me. I made a video on this, and honestly, it's kept me alive when I was in like really sad states. I don't get like that anymore. I mean, because, okay, so I need to go. Okay, so I'll have to, wait, it's like this. I think it's backwards in this. I'd have to be closer. There. It's kind of like this. So like there's a dip down here, and then it goes up, and then I'd have to get over by the ocean because you're not seeing in this. But I'm gonna leave. You can watch that video. I forgot what it's called, but if I remember, then I'll link it. Or if someone else has seen it, put it in the comments. Much love. Bye, y'all.